Deuteronomy chapter 12 is where we are this evening. Going to be moving through Deuteronomy 12 through 13, just covering 2 chapters tonight. And if you're taking notes, the title of this message is Right Worship. Right Worship. And of course, is Moses that wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, including the book of Deuteronomy. And the theme of this book is equipped to enter in, as that is what Moses is doing as he's speaking to this new generation of Israel there at the border of Canaan. He's equipping them with God's word to enter into the life that God has for them. And we've broken this book up into 3 sections. The first section was in chapters 1 through 3, there as Moses remembered the past. He is currently in the second section, which spans chapters 4 through 26. He is reviewing in the present. And this is a long message that Moses gives there at the border of Canaan, sharing with the people God's word, God's heart for his people, again, to equip them as they get ready to enter into the life that he has for them. And then the third section, which is going to be chapter 27 through 34, we see Moses readying the people for the future. There, as they get ready to go in under the leadership of Joshua, well, he is readying them for that there in the last part of this book. And as Moses is continuing to share with the people what God had done and what he has said, how he had instructed his people, well, he moves tonight onto the subject and hones in on the people worshiping the Lord there in the land of Canaan. And as the people of God were called to only worship God, to see him as the one true God and to worship him only, they were to not look to the idols and the false gods that would be in the culture of the land of Canaan. And Moses hones in on that subject tonight, seeking to show that God had very specific instructions and direction for his people that they were to follow. And with that specific instruction also came some high standards and some accountability as well, that if that was not followed, well, there would be consequences, there would be issues for the people, and Moses will speak to those things tonight. And so looking at right worship for the people of God is what we're seeing tonight in the text. And so if you will, let's pick up there in verse 12. We're going to read the first 7 verses together to get our study moving forward. We will pray after that one more time, and then we'll keep going. So Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 1. It says, "These are the statutes and the judgments which you shall be careful to observe in the land which the Lord God of your fathers is giving you to possess all the days that you live on the earth. And you shall utterly destroy all the high places where the nations which you shall dispossess served their gods on the high mountains and on the hills and under every green tree. And you shall destroy their altars, break their sacred pillars, and burn their wooden images with fire. And you shall cut down the carved images of their gods and destroy their names from that place. And you shall not worship the Lord your God with such things. But you shall seek the place where the Lord your God chooses out of all of your tribes to put his name for his dwelling place, and there you shall go. There you shall take your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tithes, the heave offerings of your hand, your vowed offerings, your freewill offerings, and the firstborn of your herds and flocks. And there you shall eat before the Lord your God, and you shall rejoice in all to which you have put your hand, you and your households, in which the Lord your God has blessed you." Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for this night. And Lord, thank you so much for, Lord, another Wednesday to come here, Lord, the middle of the week, to take, Lord, a break from it all, if you will, and to come here, Lord, to worship you and to focus, to write our heart and minds upon you, and to write our hearts and minds upon your word. And I'm just so thankful, Lord, for this night. I'm thankful for these that have come out tonight, the ones that are watching online, and I just thank you that, Lord, we together can get into your word. And tonight as your word speaks to us, Lord, about focusing on you in worship, and about how you, Lord, are to be worshiped in the right way. And we are to take it very seriously. God, I pray that tonight our hearts and minds would be open and ready to hear from you, Lord. And not just to hear a Bible study and to learn a text, but, Lord, to learn how to apply these things to our life and live in light of it. To live in light of our relationship that we have with you and in light of what you want to do through that. And so, God, open our hearts and minds tonight. Make us ready to hear you. Anoint this time, Lord, and lead us in your will. Lead us in understanding, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Well, as Moses begins to speak to the people regarding the worship of God, he first speaks of God designating a place for the people to worship him. The right place, you see, it mattered to God. And if you have been with us throughout the study of the first 5 books of the Bible, then perhaps you remember that the people of God have been given a specific place for worship of the Lord's. God had given instructions back in the book of Exodus, you'll remember, as they came out of Egypt. He gave them specific instructions regarding something called the tabernacle. Now, the tabernacle was a tent, a portable tent, in fact, that was to be set up anywhere that the nation of Israel was to be camped. And it moved with the people. It was to be the central point of the camp. Wherever they were to be able to come out of their tent and look and see the tabernacle. And that was where the priests of Israel, they ministered, the Levites served as well. And it's where God had given them the instruction to bring their sacrifices, their offerings there. And it was all very, very detailed in the instruction on how to build, how to orient the tabernacle, how to orient the court of the tabernacle. It was an important thing. And it was the designated place for worship. And again, as the people were wandering in the wilderness, it went wherever they went. However, when the people come into the land of Canaan, and as they come into this land that is promised to them, and after conquering the land, well, they would begin and will begin, we'll see in the book of Joshua, to possess the land that is allotted to their tribes. So the large tribes, we remember, will get large lots of land, and the smaller tribes will get smaller ones. But the main thing to point out here is that they will no longer be grouped together in one location, all traveling as one, but they will be spread across the land of Israel. And the tabernacle, this tent, which will still be the central place of worship for God's people, well, it will be designated to reside in one spot that the Lord will choose. And all of Israel will know where it is. In fact, at least 3 times a year, the men of Israel will need to travel to the tabernacle so as to celebrate certain feasts that God called for them to. There would still be a central location of worship for the people. Again, it just wouldn't be as close as it currently is. They wouldn't be able to wake up in the morning and come out of their tent and look and say, hey, the tabernacle's right there. The cloud, the fire, it's right there above it. It wasn't going to be that close anymore. In fact, it could potentially be miles and miles away. And the Lord, knowing this, gives instruction to his people about how they are to worship as they get into the land. And regarding the place of worship, the people of God were to still look to the tabernacle as their central place of worship and sacrifice. They weren't to look elsewhere. And specifically, what we just saw in the text as we were reading is they weren't to look to the places of worship that the people of the land, the people that they were going to conquer, they weren't to look to those places that they currently worshiped at as an option. They were to see them as a viable option for worshiping the Lord. And this was something important to point out. Because culturally, in the moving and the conquering and being conquered of nations, understand that according to the culture and customs of the day, if you were a conquering people taking over someone's land, well, then as you took possession of their land and the infrastructure of that land, well, it was yours. It was yours to use as you saw fit. So if they had a city that you conquered and wiped them out from, that city, it was yours. If they had houses and wells and all kinds of infrastructure, again, things that you could use, well, as the conquering people, it was yours to use. And that included the places of worship. And oftentimes, places of worship that the people would use to worship their false gods, well, they would be places that were the most beautiful, on some high mountain or a hill or in a lush forest or a garden, something like that. And typically, because the place was already set up for worship, the conquering people would come in, they would find the place where these gods were worshiped by this people that they just wiped out, and they would go in and say, all right, well, we're going to put our gods in here. Literally, they would take their god off the shelf, if you will, and then put their god on the shelf, which really says something about how powerful their God was. But anyways, they had a place that was available to them. It was ready to go. And the conquered nation would have done the work for the conquering nation of picking the best spots so the new nation could just move right in. But the Lord's people and the Lord's instruction to his people, as they were to be a special people, that was to be not what they did. They weren't to do that. They weren't to worship in the places that were already set up, or to think that they could just move in and start worshiping God in these pagan temples or high places. But they were to destroy them, we see in the text. They were to destroy those places of worship, completely tear them down and wipe them out. And God made it very clear that they weren't to seek those places as a convenient option, right? They weren't to go in there and be like, well, it's already here. I can worship the Lord here. Just move these things off the shelf and just worship the Lord. No, he was very clear not to be about that. In fact, the instruction in verse 5 is clear, but you shall seek the place where the Lord your God chooses out of all of your tribes to put his name for his dwelling place, and there you should go. You see, God would determine the place for the people. They weren't to look for convenience. They were to look to the Lord's. And in the verses that we read, we saw that it was there that they were to bring their offerings, their sacrifices, again, their heave offerings, tithes, vowed offerings, all the things that God called for. And the place that God designated for them, that was to be where they went. Nowhere else were they to look. It was where the people were to worship. God had the right place in mind when it came to his people worshiping. He wanted them to live and worship where he called them, not to where it was convenient, not to where they desired in and of themselves. And though we, in our own life, living with the Lord, we are not under the same instruction to only worship God in one place. In fact, we don't have to make a trip anywhere to worship the Lord. We are instructed in the book of Hebrews to be able to run boldly into the throne room of grace. And that is anywhere. We can worship the Lord anywhere at any time. We have that ability. However, there is something to be said for us as people when it comes to us being in fellowship with the local body, belonging to a church. And that is that God doesn't just want us to be anywhere. Like he doesn't just want us to apathetically or flippantly pick anywhere just to fit in to any church. But God, I firmly believe, wants us as people, as his people, to be in a place and involved with a local church where he is truly glorified and his word is amplified. I believe that is God's heart for us. And it should be, especially for us who are believers in Jesus Christ, that should be what we desire as we seek to follow the Lord. That should be the top priority and on the top of our list when it comes to fitting into and choosing a church to call home as we seek to live our lives for the Lord. Whether you are by yourself or part of a family, maybe you're leading your family or whatever it may be. As you seek to find a place to worship God and call your church home, we should not be satisfied with a place of worship, a local church where Jesus and the Bible are nowhere to be seen. Where they are not the center, that is not a place for us. You see, as a believer in Jesus, who is called by Jesus to grow in him and to serve him with our lives, we need to be in fellowship with other believers. And we need to be those who are in fellowship in places that are going to equip us with the word. Because in the Word, you know this, you're here on Wednesday night, in the Word, Jesus, he is known, he is amplified, he is glorified. And in the Word, we are spurred on to live for and to glorify Jesus with our lives. And understand that as people of Israel, we're not to worship in just any place, but we're to look for the place that God has for them. I believe too, that God has a place for each one of us to fit into. He has a church home, a church body, if you will, that truly represents his heart and seeks to know his heart through his word and then make his heart known. I believe that God has those places for us, but like his people, we don't need to seek anything else other than him. Understand, we need to not be satisfied with just any place. We need to seek the place that he has for us. And we talk about this all the time. That as we seek the Lord and seek to follow the Lord and know the Lord, understand that if you ask the Lord, hey, Lord, where's the place for me? As you're perhaps looking for a church home sometime, the Lord takes you away from Paris, Texas, takes you away from here. And you think to yourself, I need to be in fellowship with God's people. And you absolutely do. Understand, that is something too we need to know. That as God's people, we're not to be Lone Ranger Christians. We're not to be out and about by ourselves. Because as we're out and about by ourselves, we're easy targets. If you think you can go it alone, Satan, he's got his crosshairs right on you, ready to take you out. And quite honestly, you'll be pretty easy to take out. Maybe not at first, but eventually you will be. And as you're seeking the Lord, as we seek the Lord at any time, and we should be seeking the Lord, Lord, where do you have me in my life? Where do you have me in the place you want me to live, the place you want me to work, the place that you want me to be? And if you seek truly the Lord's will for your life, for a church that is going to glorify him and teach the word, well, I can promise you the Lord, he'll show you where that place is. I promise you the Lord, if we seek him on anything and seek his will genuinely, wanting to know what he has, as we ask, he will answer. As we ask, he will show us. He'll show you exactly where to go. And then, of course, it's up to you whether you go there. And again, as his people, as believers in Jesus Christ, that should matter to us. It should matter to you where you call church home. It should matter to you where you, of course, take yourself, where you take your family. It should matter to you where you are being fed the word of God. And if that place feeds you the word of God as well. It shouldn't just be somewhere where you just think it's, the right thing to do because it's, again, convenience. And it's funny that as a pastor, sometimes I have conversations with people out and about. And about with being a pastor, conversations are always interesting when they find out that you are a pastor, because what oftentimes is one, the language cleans up very quickly. It's amazing that happens. Just immediately, it's just like, oh, I need to not say those words. You shouldn't say them anyway. But anyways, I tell people about, being a pastor, and I ask them, where do you go to church? And oftentimes, if they're not going to church, there's a good reason why that they give, but there's always this idea, this qualifier, that they're going to go to church. And there's always this qualifying, event in their life. And it often revolves around kids or, stability in job schedule or whatever it is. It's like, yeah, church is important, and when I have kids one day or when the kids are older, they need that, so we'll go to church then. That's often the thing. It prompts people to search for a church home, different stages of life. But when I have those conversations, it just seems that any old church will do. It's just like, yeah, church is important. And so one day we'll go and, we may just pull out a map of Paris and throw a dart at it, and that's where we'll be, or wherever our friends are, or whatever provides the best amenities, because we treat churches like hotels sometimes. That's the winner. But understand, the truth is that not all churches are the same. Not all churches are the same. Not all churches that claim to be a church and follow the Lord are actually following the Lord. Just because church is on, the building, on the sign, it doesn't mean that church is truly going after God's heart. It doesn't truly mean that Jesus is at the center and his word is what is being taught day in and day out. And so what is needed to be exercised is discernment. And as God's people, we need to be those who are listening to the Lord and following him to where he is at and to where he desires for us to be at, where we will learn the word and again, learn his heart. That needs to be the case with all of us. We need to seek to be those that as we belong to the church, a local church body, we seek where Jesus is amplified and his word is taught, where that is the priority. That is so important for us. And if it's not clearly evident to you, should you visit a church? Should you seek to say, Lord, I believe you're moving me on somewhere? And if you perhaps are choosing a church or someone who's choosing a church, you can exhort them into, telling them, hey, here's how you choose a church or here's what you look for. If after the first time, and perhaps even some people like to go a second or third time to see if it was just a fluke, that Jesus is not seen clearly and the Bible is not taught, clearly as well, then that's not a place for you. It's not a place for me. It's not a place for us. Because we need to be, as the church, where the Lord is, again, taught and followed. And, here at Calvary Chapel Paris, we aren't perfect. You stay for any amount of time, I promise you, you will learn that. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. We're all just going to not be perfect together. And that's fine, because we're not perfect. But I can tell you that here at this church, that our heart is to know Jesus and to make him known. And I believe firmly that happens as we teach the Bible. As we study the Bible together, chapter by chapter and verse by verse, we will know Jesus and be spurred on to make him known. That's our mission. That's our desire here. And not just teaching to know the word, but teaching and reading the word so as to live the word. Jesus and the word of God is what's going to be the center of this local church body. And again, that should matter. That should matter to us. Though God gives us the freedom to follow him, and he leads us to places and spaces where we can worship him anywhere, we need to be those who realize it is important to be in a home church and to be in a place where we are amongst other believers, where Jesus is the focus and his word is taught unapologetically and consistently. That is so important, and it matters. As the Lord speaks to his people here about the places they are not to worship and that he will designate a place for them. But then Moses, he continues on, and what he talks about next is not just about the place, but he includes the fact that not only is the right place important, but so too is the right practice important when it comes to worship. It matters. Pick up there with me in verse 8. As he says, "And you shall not at all do as we are doing here today, where every man is doing whatever is right in his own eyes. For as yet you have not come to the rest and the inheritance which the Lord your God is giving you. But when you cross over the Jordan and dwell in the land which the Lord your God is giving you to inherit, and he gives you rest from all your enemies round about so that you dwell in safety, well, then there will be the place where the Lord your God chooses to make his name abide. And there you shall bring all that I command you, your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tithes, the heave offerings of your hand, and all your choice offerings which you vow to the Lord. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God, and you and your sons and your daughters, your male and your female servants, and the Levite who is within your gates, since he has no portion nor inheritance with you. Take heed to yourself that you do not offer your burnt offerings in every place that you see, but in the place which the Lord chooses in one of your tribes, there you shall offer your burnt offerings, and there you shall do all that I command you. Still continuing to speak of the place that God designates as the appropriate place for his people to worship. That is still important. It's kind of all intertwined in this. But Moses also begins to instruct the people on how they are to worship the Lord in the right manner. And you notice what he says there in verse 8. He says, you shall not at all do as we are doing here today, where every man is doing whatever is right in his own eyes. Now, understand, we aren't given much detail into exactly what is going on here. However, it is inferred in this verse and in the continuing exhortation that there was compromise, that the people were compromising even now in their worship to the Lord. And again, if you've been with us through the study of the book of Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, well, you know that the Lord, as he's spoken to his people, he has given very detailed instructions. He's been very specific, down to the very detail of every single thing that he desires as his people would worship him, as they would bring offerings and sacrifices. He has told them time and again, here is what I desire, follow these instructions. However, what we see here is that the people, well, they were doing what was right in their own eyes, and this was something to be addressed. Moses tells them there that they weren't to look to their preference, their desires for how they approach the Lord. They were to look to his standards. They were to look to the details, again, the standards that he had given them clearly, and that is what they were to follow. And this came out there in the verses to follow, in verses 15 through 28. I'm going to let you read those on your own. But what it deals with there is how the people treated animals that they were killing for food versus how they were killing for sacrifice. And the Lord, he wanted them to differentiate between the two. It was important that they did. And it was especially important that they did there in the land that they were going into, because in the land, the cultures and the false worship that was going on there, well, everything that they butchered for food was also a sacrifice. That was not to be the case with the people of Israel. There was a distinction that was made. And so that is an example we see in verses 15 through 28. But this really comes out in a heavy way as we skip over to verse 29. And we pick up there and read through verse 32, where the Lord, he gives instruction here. And it says there that when the Lord your God cuts off from before you the nations which you go to dispossess, and you displace them and dwell in their land, well, take heed to yourself that you are not ensnared to follow them after they are destroyed from before you, and that you do not inquire after their gods, saying, how did these nations serve their gods? For I will also do likewise. You shall not worship the Lord your God in that way, for every abomination to the Lord which he hates, they have done to their gods, for they burn even their sons and daughters in the fire to their gods. Whatever I command you, you be careful to observe it, and you shall not add to it or take away from it. You see, not only were the people warned to not look to their own preference for worship, but they were also, we see here, not to stray away from the instructions of the Lord and seek to practice and worship the Lord in the same way as the cultures around them. Notice that God, he even points out there that they aren't to be curious about how they worshiped and how they viewed their false gods. He says they do not inquire after their gods, saying, how did these nations serve the Lord? He wants them to just stay away from it. He wants them to stay ignorant of it, you could even say. And I appreciate that about the Lord. I appreciate about this, the Lord here in this instruction, because God knew the way in which the people of the land worshiped their false gods. He knew the way that they did these things, and it was honestly disgusting. In studying for these Bible studies, oftentimes I will study the cultures and things like that. It's just part of the game. And it's no wonder that God told his people not to be curious, because quite honestly, the way that the Canaanite people worship their false gods, it is just that. It is disgusting. It involved unnatural, vile, and even brutal practices, much like what the Lord points out there in verse 31, as he speaks of the people burning their kids in the fire. This is a reference to human sacrifice, specifically human sacrifice of little babies. And as you continue to study the Old Testament and you see the cultures of the land, there's one particular sacrifice to the god of Molech that involved the sacrifice of children upon the altar of Molech, and it was a brutal worship service, a practice that sadly, in the history of Israel would participate in. In fact, the kings of Israel would even sanction, and some of them even participated in that as well. And so God telling the people, hey, don't even look into that. That was wise on the Lord's part. It was wise on the Lord's part to say, hey, well, as you go into the land and you wipe out these altars, as you wipe out these high places, don't even look into what they did. Don't go try to look through the ancient writings. Don't go look through, what their gods look like and how to practice it. He said, just stay away from it. It's a great thing for us to hear tonight too, so, I believe. Things of the world, things of culture around us, sometimes ignorance, it truly is bliss. Sometimes ignorance, or you could say innocence, innocence like a child. And that's something to hold to. And the Lord, as he calls us to walk, looking to him and focusing on him and living in faith towards him. There's something to be said about staying innocent when it comes to the evil that's in this world. Someone says, hey, did you see this movie? Hey, let me show you the preview. No, I don't want to see that. Someone says, hey, you want to listen to this new song about this new artist about this thing? And he says this about, no, stop talking to me. I don't want to hear it. I don't want that in my brain. Someone shows you a picture of something, you're like, stay away from that. There's something good about keeping your mind pure before the Lord by not even being curious about what's out there, not even being curious. And that doesn't mean that you are ignorant to the point of not knowing how to protect yourself or your family. But when you have the option and the ability, when someone shows you or wants to show you something that you have no business as a believer in Jesus looking at, hey, stay away from it. It'll do us a lot of good. It keeps our minds pure before the Lord. And God knew, again, the way that the people of the land worshiped. He knew the harm it would cause the people. And so in verse 32, what does he say? He says, whatever I command you. He says, whatever I command you, be careful to observe it. You shall not add to it, nor take away from it. A great summary verse here for this whole chapter and for looking to the right practice of worship. God had prescribed it. He had pointed the people in the way that would point to him, that would lead them to him, to his presence. That was the whole point, you'll remember, of the tabernacle. That was the whole point of the sacrificial system, so that the people of God could be near God. He says, what I've instructed you to do, what I command you, be careful to observe it. Don't add to it. Don't take away from it. Stay away from the other stuff. Look to me, he says. And my friends, something that should be the case for our life as well is that we should worship the Lord in a way that is consistent with the Word of God, in a way that is consistent with the Word and what shows and points us to him. That should be the way that we worship. That should be how we do it. It's to be all about the Lord and not about us, not about preference, not about looking like the world or trying to fit in with the world or things like that. No, we should seek to worship the Lord in the way that is consistent with his word and consistent with us seeing him. And a great way to gauge that, hey, am I worshiping in the right way? Because again, in the same way that we don't have a specific place that we are called to go, there's also not a prescribed sacrificial system that we fit into. But I would say this, that if you are doubting whether your worship is towards the Lord or towards something else, see if the Lord is the central focus. See if the Lord is the focus of your worship. Or is it someone else? Is it yourself? Is it somebody else other than yourself? Is it some, fad or trend or whatever it may be? If it's anything other than the Lord, then it's off base. And so seek the Lord and serve him and follow and worship him. Again, looking to the word of God as the example. That's the best way. That's the best way for us. And so God has told his people, right worship happens in the right place. And it happens with the right practice. But as we open up in chapter 13, we come now to the Lord pointing out that not only is it the right place that matters and the right practice that matters, but also the right person to be worshiped, well, that also matters. And of course, we know that he's pointing to himself. He's pointing to the Lord. And so we need to know and see that the Lord gives instruction here, really in 3 scenarios, on how the people are to make sure that they are focused on him and worshiping him rightly and not tolerating false worship amongst them. And we're going to pick up in verse 1 of chapter 13. We're actually going to read all of chapter 13 in one go. It's just 18 verses. You guys can hang with that. And we're going to read them, and then we will parcel it out and discuss it. So it says there in verse 1, that if there arises among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and he gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder comes to pass of which he spoke to you, saying, let us go after other gods, which you have not known, and let us serve them, well, then you shall not listen to the words that prophet or that dreamer dreams. For the Lord your God is testing you to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. And you shall walk after the Lord your God and fear him and keep his commandments and obey his voice. And you shall serve him and hold fast to him. But that prophet or that dreamer of dreams shall be put to death, because he has spoken in order to turn you away from the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and redeemed you from the house of bondage, to entice you from the way in which the Lord your God commanded you to walk. and so you shall put away the evil from your midst. And if your brother, the son of your mother, your son or your daughter, the wife of your bosom, or your friend who is as your own soul, secretly entices you, saying, let us go and serve other gods, which you have not known, neither you nor your fathers, of the gods of the people which are all around you, near to you or far off from you, from one end of the earth to the other end of the earth, well, you shall not consent to him or listen to him, nor shall your eye pity him, and nor shall you spare him or conceal him. But you shall surely kill him. Your hand shall be first against him to put him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people. And you shall stone him with stones until he dies, because he has sought to entice you away from the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of your God, away from the Lord your God, who brought you out from the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage. So all of Israel shall hear and fear, and not again do such wickedness as this among you. And if you hear someone in one of your cities, which the Lord your God gives you to dwell in, saying, corrupt men have gone out from among you, and enticed the inhabitants of their city, saying, let us go and serve other gods which you have not known, then you shall inquire, search out, and ask diligently. And if it is indeed true and certain that such an abomination was committed among you, well, you shall surely strike the inhabitants of that city with the edge of the sword, utterly destroying it, all that is in it, and its livestock, with the edge of the sword. And you shall gather all its plunder into the middle of the street, and completely burn it with fire, the city and all its plunder, for the Lord your God. And it shall be a heap forever. It shall not be built again. And so none of the accursed things shall remain in your hand, that the Lord may turn from the fierceness of his anger, and show you mercy, have compassion on you, and multiply you, just as he swore to your fathers, because you have listened to the voice of the Lord your God, to keep all his commandments, which I command you today, to do what is right in the eyes of the Lord your God. Again, instruction is given now on worshiping the right person. That, of course, is the Lord to the people of Israel. And there are three scenarios that are given here for the people. And the first one is seen in verses 1 through 6, where there Moses speaks of a false prophet, a prophet that would come to seek to draw the people away. And in the prophesying or the dreaming that this prophet would have, if they said something, they had a dream, and what they prophesied came to pass, but then they sought to say, hey, as you see that I'm legitimate, as you see this thing has come to pass, now follow me as we follow after these other gods of the land. Well, there's a couple things that we see here. We see that the Lord, he's honest, that, hey, he is not of me. And what is more is the Lord is saying, hey, this is from the Lord to test you. The Lord allowed this to come into your camp to see if you're going to follow after false prophets or if you're going to follow after the Lord, the one true God. And they are to see this as a test from the Lord, but also they are not to follow this prophet, but rather they are to deal with the situation, and they're to deal with it harshly. Notice with all of these that the punishment is on a capital level. There is to be the offender put to death for seeking to lead people away from the Lord. And so this first scenario is if a prophet was to rise up and seek to say, hey, something's going to happen. And then that thing happens. And then they say, hey, let's follow after gods that are not the true God. Well, that is not from the Lord. Rather, it is from Satan. The next scenario, a bit tougher one, as it refers to family members seeking to draw away people from the worship of God. The one who is being tempted to draw away wasn't just to let it go, notice that, but they needed to deal with it in a real way, which would no doubt be hard, but needed to take place. And we see there in verses 7 through 11 that God prescribes that, hey, you are not to, listen to them. You're not to hold to what they say, nor are you, he says, to conceal them, but you're to let it know. Let it be known what is going on. And then as they are to move forward, he says in verse 9, you are surely to kill him, and your hand is to be first against him to put to death, and afterward the hand of all the people. They would stone them to death. And that would be what they called them to do. And, thinking about that and praying through that, while we are not to be those that when a family member seeks to walk away from the Lord or seeks to go in a way that is opposite of God's will, of God's purpose, of God's direction, while we should not be those who look to see that this is still the mandate for today, what we need to be are those who seek to say that as the Lord wants to lead our life, that even if our family, even if those in our family seek to move away from God's will, seek to move away and even seek to entice and draw others away, that we are to be those that stick with the Lord. And indeed with family, that can be hard. In this room, I know that there are people who have that going on in their life. Maybe in a marriage or an extended family or a father and mother situation or whatever it may be. And it can be hard sometimes. It can be hard at all times to know that, hey, they are going a way that is not pleasing to the Lord. But we, as God's people, we are to stick with the Lord. We are to stick with him and follow his will, his direction. That is what is right for God's people. And we're to be open with that, I believe. We are to be open when they ask the questions, why don't you come to this thing? Why don't you stay for the holidays? Why don't you stay as we're coming closer to Thanksgiving, closer to Christmas here pretty soon? You know, things as we get together with families, those kind of conversations can start to happen. And we as God's people, we need to be those who are bold and prayerful and just say, you know, it's where I need to be. I need to be with the Lord. I need to side with the Lord. I'm not going to participate in the activities that perhaps they participate in. I'm not going to seek to engage in the conversations and let it go the way that they want it to go. I'm going to stick with the Lord and honoring him. That's what we're called to. And it's hard, but it is the right way. It is what we are called to do. The third scenario has to deal with the whole community that was involved in the worship of false god. And there was to be a full inquiry, we see, launched to make sure that it was true. But then after it was found out to be the case, then it was to be dealt with, again, seriously, on a capital level. It was to be dealt with in the way that God prescribed for it. And we have an example, though not on a large level, on a citywide level. We have an example found in the book of Joshua that really ties into this, there with the family of Achan. Perhaps you've read this story, you know of it, there in Joshua chapter 7, where after the battle of Jericho, the nation of Israel goes in, they defeat the town of Jericho, and it's all amazing. The Lord does a great work there. They were obedient to the Lord's plan. However, they then go in chapter 7 to Ai, and they seek to go and they fight in their own strength, and what happens there is they lose. They lose that battle. 36 Israelites are killed, and they realize, hey, this is not right. We shouldn't be losing this way. This shouldn't happen. And Joshua, he falls on his face before the Lord. He says, Lord, what's going on? Why did we lose in this way? And the Lord says to Joshua, hey, get up. There's sin in the camp. There are issues. There are things that you don't know about that need to be found out and dealt with. And so they go through this process of seeking out all the people of Israel to stand before the Lord and stand before Joshua. And they narrow it down, and they launch, again, a full inquiry to see who and what is going on here. And they find that the family that Achan had stolen from Jericho. As he was told not to do, he did so anyways, and he was hiding in his tents. And as that happened, he was a danger. He was a danger to all of the security of Israel at that point. And so God said to deal with it, and they dealt with it on a capital level, where him and his family and all of their animals, everything, they died, and they were put in under a heap of stones, and they were left there. And that was meant to be a message and a showing of, hey, this is where this compromise it'll lead. And God was very clear, and really with all of these scenarios and the actions that were required, the principle of not of looking only to the Lord, to the Lord found in verse 4, that is really key. Verse 4 is key as he says, you shall walk after the Lord your God and fear him and keep his commandments to obey his voice. He says, you shall serve him and hold fast to him. The Lord was who the people were to worship. They were to only worship the one true God. And he was who the people were to direct their worship to in the right place, in the right way. Again, it was all to be to God, who was their worship, who was to be the recipient of their worship, where it was to be directed. And anywhere else for the people of God to direct their worship to. Any place that was wrong, any practice that was wrong, any person that was wrong, it was sinful, and it would end up leading the people into some bad places they were never meant to be. In fact, as you continue to read and study the Old Testament, you learn that's exactly what happens. You learn that the people are worshiping consistently in the wrong place. As you read through the books of the kings of Israel, you see that the high places there in the nation, they were allowed to remain. They were worshiping in the wrong way, seeking after self and seeking after pleasure, seeking to fit in with the cultures of the land. That was something that is going to happen and caused a lot of issues. They were worshiping the wrong thing, not worshiping the one true God. Many of the kings of Israel are going to lead the people into idolatry, causing issues consistently throughout Israel's history. And it doesn't end well for them. They consistently find themselves in the wrong places and in judgment that they bring upon themselves because of their false worship. It's not a good thing for Israel as they deviate from this. And the same scenario, quite honestly, the same scenario that any of us here tonight is what we can find ourselves in as well, as we can so easily get our worship and get our eyes off the Lord and onto other things. See, we are a people who are made to worship the Lord and who are called to worship the Lord, to have a right heart and frame of mind when it comes to worship. And understand that worship, we need to understand this. It doesn't just, relate to a worship service. So that's where we see it, and that's something that's important to concentrate on. Understand when we are together, we come together to sing songs, to study the word. That's an element of worship that's very important. We don't need to neglect this. We need to be about this. It needs to be a priority in our lives. That's why, I love Wednesday nights so much, because you guys are here in the middle of the week. You make this a priority. It's amazing. You bring your kids here. It's a priority. It's amazing. And the Lord, He is pleased with that. But right worship really finds itself in how we focus, not just on Sundays and on Wednesdays, but how we focus our life. How we live our life for the Lord and live it in a way that is worship to Him. And again, these three things that we've looked at tonight, they all fit into that. Being in the right place that He would have us in, namely God's will. Knowing what His will is for your life and seeking to live that out. And how we find out what the will of God is by allowing Him to transform our minds. That's what Romans 12:2 tells us. It tells us to not be conformed to this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of our mind, that we may know what is that good, acceptable, and perfect will of God. To be in the right place, we seek the Lord's transformation in our life. To be in the right place, we seek Him out and follow His way, His will, and we'll be where we need to be. In the right church, in the right place, we'll be there. But also to be in the right practice that He calls us to. And the right practice as we follow the Lord and worship the Lord with our lives is according to His word. We know that from 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17, that all of God's word, it is God's word, and it is profitable for doctrine. It is truth, and it's profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be equipped, may be complete, thoroughly equipped for every good work. We walk in the right place, and we walk in the right way, the right practice that He calls us to as we walk according to His word. And we worship through our life as we look to the right person, as we look to Jesus Christ, as we look to Him, and we aim our affections, we aim all of our desire onto Him and towards Him, and seek to have His will be what is number one in our lives. And all of our life, well, it should be worship to the Lord. It should be looking to Him, to be where He has us, to be where He wants us to be, and to be doing the things that He wants us to be about. That's what our life is to be. That's what the life of the people of Israel was to be about, what God is calling them to here in the text tonight. And I pray that it would be what we realize is God's desire for our lives as well. That God desires for our hearts and lives to belong to Him. And that we would live in that way. We'd live in light of that belonging. We live in light of that. And all of our life would be worship. All of our life would be worship as we seek, again, the place. As we seek to walk in the practice and the worship that God has called us to, all looking to the person of Jesus Christ, because He's the center figure of our faith, of our worship. And the people of God were to be worshiping the people, were to be a worshiping people in the land of Canaan. And the same is true for us. We are to be a worshiping people, different, distinct in this world. And we do so as we worship in the right way. And tonight as we get ready to wind down and we get ready to worship ourselves, and we're going to end a little bit earlier so as to be able to worship for an extended time. We have a couple songs instead of just one to close us out. I pray that as we worship tonight and as we do what we're here to do, and that is to focus on the Lord, to know Him more, to exalt Him in our hearts and minds, and to fuel really our lives. I pray that we would take to heart tonight the fact that God, He calls us to Himself, and He calls us into this world to be a worshiping people. To be a people that is distinct, to be a people that is different, and that shows His love for this whole world out. And we do that, again, as we look to Him. We seek to be where He wants us, and we seek to be walking in the way that He calls us. And we do that best as we focus on Him. And so I pray tonight that we would seek that. I pray that our heart would be aligned with the heart of the Lord. And the way to find that out is simply to ask the Lord. To simply ask the Lord and to check your heart and life against the Word of God and seek to say, Lord, am I living in the way that You want? Am I living in a way that is worshipful? Is my life worship to You? And as you look at the Scriptures, as you ask the Lord again, you ask Him to reveal to you, you ask Him to talk to you, you ask Him to tell you honestly where you're at with Him, He'll do it. He'll do it. The conviction of the Holy Spirit on our lives, man, He is there faithful to speak to us and to speak to us clearly if we'll listen then we'll hear him. And so tonight, as we see here that God calls his people there in Israel to right worship, so too do we need to know he's calling us to the same thing. And we as a people, we should seek to worship with our lives rightly, looking to the Lord and following him every step of the way. And if we'll surrender to that, we'll see the Lord work. We'll see him move in our life and work in our life in ways that are amazing. But we have to do that. We have to surrender to him. We have to allow him to work. And so I pray tonight that you, myself, all of us, that we would do that. And we would see the Lord want to lead and work through us.